I would like to welcome everyone to our monthly topic webinar for the Consulting Webinar Series. This month our focus is on pricing and doing an overview of some different functionality and features and things you can fine-tune within that area. Kyle is going to lead our session today, and he'll take us through a couple of different examples. And a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. I will go ahead and put everybody on mute just to kind of drown out any background noise, and there will be time at the end for Q&A. So if you want to use the chat box on the GoToMeeting interface, the box on the side, if you want to just send your question throughout the session, we'll use that to kind of go through and monitor and see what's going on. So with that, I'll just go ahead and Kyle, I'll let you run with it.
Okay, sounds good. So the first comment I'd like to make is obviously pricing is a very volatile topic. It can change depending on who's working on it, who the customer is, who you're working with. So I'm more just going to talk about a lot of the concepts and the tools that you can utilize and show you the basics of it. And if you have some more questions on that, or you wanted some help with setting anything up or anything that involves going through and actually utilizing these functions, you can definitely contact our consulting department and we can set up a session to help go through any individual topics. So I'm going to give you the tools that you can use to make those adjustments, but if you want to dive further into it, I'd be more than happy to help answer any questions or help with any formulas that you guys want to work on. So go ahead and just kind of go through. I'm going to start off with some of the basic ideas that are mentioned in the main review, and just go over a couple of other additional ones on there. So the first item on our list here is kind of modifiers. So modifiers are a function that it's not utilized all that much, but you can do a good bit with them. And what a modifier basically is, it's a way to kind of answer a question or enter an additional information that isn't answered by any of the other normal fields that are in the system. So like the two most common ones that utilize that are going to be under, like if I go to digital prints and wide format print, you have under here, you have the add-on section, and that's where the modifiers are. And like I said, the most common ones there are, you have a rush charge, and then you have a additional mounting labor that's tied to, which is tied to an actual part that pulls in additional labor, and things like that. So they are questions that aren't handled by the main form that you could actually create, and you can tell at different types. So you can do a checkbox, you can do a drop-down, you can do a spinner box, but basically modifiers are fields that you can create to ask any other number of questions that you can't handle through the main form. So to set up those modifiers, if you go to Setup, Pricing Setup, and then All Pricing Setup, over here under the supporting components is a section for modifier setup. So modifiers are grouped into different categories. The category is just for the purposes of looking at it here to find that modifier. So it doesn't matter where you stick that modifier. You can create a different category. You can create subcategories. The category is more just for your own information whenever you're going to search through here. So we'll just go ahead and under General, we'll just go ahead and create a new modifier and talk about some of the things that you can do with that. So we'll say new modifier, and the first thing is modifier code. So you're just going to give your modifier a name. Print as is whenever you go to some of the forms have a built-in section that prints out the modifier names, and it will use the print as to print that modifier name on the different layouts on the estimates and invoices. And then the question, that's the actual question that shows up on your order entry screen. So whenever we looked into that list and said, is there a rush charge? Is there additional finishing? That's the question that's going to see for whoever's entering in the item onto their order estimate. That's what you're going to see. So So with modifiers, you have three different types of modifiers. You can do a checkbox, you can do a numeric spinner, or you can do a drop-down box. So that just kind of depends how you enter it in. Do you put in a number? Do you select something from a drop-down? Do you just check a box? You tell that modifier how to work. So that's how you can set up your modifier. Then comes the pricing. And with pricing, there's a couple different functions that you can do. You could go here and say, use this formula if you want this modifier to be just a flat price. So I can go and say that, whenever I check this modifier, it's a flat $70 fee no matter what. You can tell it to, if we tie a part to this modifier, you can tell it to just use the suggested price from parts if you tie a part to this. And then also you can do additional formulas. So with the case of a numeric spinner modifier, where you actually put a number, modifiers have a built-in formula for QTY applied. And that basically is referencing an internal number that this modifier uses. So in the case of a spinner, that is your drop-down. So in this case here, if I made a numeric spinner and I wanted this numeric spinner to be 50 cents per whatever item I put in there, I can say QTY times 0.5, and that will add 50 cents to whatever modifier I put in there. And then also you could go in and say times quantity. So I wanted to affect this by the number of quantity that we're doing, so I can do something like that. So there is, you can tie a little bit of formula work to this if you are trying to base it off of a certain number, or you can just go in and put a flat number in there if it's just going to be something flat. So the pricing that you set up on this modifier can be a multitude of different ranges based off of what you set up on here. Sorry. Okay, so with the modifier, you set up the pricing. What you can also do then is you get to tell it which product that modifier is tied to. So when I create this modifier, it's not linked to any products right off the bat. So I would have to go through here and tell it I want to add this modifier and link it to whichever product. So you can make a modifier that is product specific. You can make it linked to all of your digital prints. You get to tell it where this modifier is going to show up under, and just go through the different products and assign that modifier to them. And then they'll show up in your list and let you know that that modifier is attached to this. The last major thing with the modifier is you can also tie parts to it. So in the case of, if you wanted to tie like a screw, bag of screws or additional tape or any type of part that you want to be able to tie this, extra labor, which is the most common use there, you can go and tie this modifier to a part in the system. So you just go and add, you can go and tell it labor and then, rail labor, select that. You're tying that modifier to here, in which case, just like if you were tying this part to a product, you can tell it when to use this part and then how much to consume. So you can tie a number of different parts to these different modifiers. And the existing modifiers give you a good example of some pricing and some part formulas that you can utilize. So if I cancel out here and we look at like the Rush, Rush has no part tied to it, but it has a pricing formula of base price times 15%. So essentially it's a percentage increase on the base price. Whereas the additional labors that we saw earlier, those use a suggested price from parts and have a labor value tied to them. So modifiers are one way that you can add additional fields that you have control over to your different products in the system. So the next two items, it's going to be a little bit quicker to go over these items because they're pretty simple in how they're utilized, but they have a good bit of complexity in terms of what you can do with them. And that is both the options up here for the pricing level and the promotion. So we've heard a couple of interesting names that people have for the pricing level, but in essence what the pricing level does is it lets you go ahead and bring the price up or down based off of a percentage that the customer doesn't actually see. So if we go in here and put in a value on this job, if we take a look here at the pricing level, there are a couple of different levels that are kind of preloaded as examples, and then you can do new ones from this list. But what this lets you do is go here and say, this is going to be for a customer that they kind of give us a little bit of a hard time, so we have to spend some extra time on their jobs, so we want to make sure that we account for that. So what we can do is we specify a pricing level of 110%, which brings the price of that job up without really showing the customer that there's a price increase. So, for those more difficult customers, you can account for the additional work, additional time that's kind of involved with working with them. And then you could also go the other way. So you have a customer that's been with you for a long time, they're a great customer, they order lots from you, and you kind of, you typically try to give them a little bit better deal than what you normally give for other people. So you could go through and do a new pricing level and call it, whatever you can call the pricing level whatever you want. and you give it a level of, let's say, we want to give them 10% off, but not really show them that they're getting 10% off. So you can create that, and that goes the opposite way, where now the price of that job, they don't see that they're getting a discount, but the price that the customer gets is lower. And you know, another good use for that is for wholesale or retail. So if you have a large chunk of wholesale customers, you can create a wholesale level that brings the price down. And the nice thing about the pricing level is once you create that level, if there's a customer that you always want to do that with, if I go in and pull up that customer, so we go and pull up the test company in this case here. At the top right of the company record, you can assign them both a pricing level and a promotion. So that way, anytime that you do a transaction for that particular customer, that pricing level or that promotion is always defaulted. You can still change it whenever you do a transaction, but you can set them to default to those values so that way you don't have to remember to do it every time. So in addition to the pricing level, we also have the promotion. Promotion is real similar in the sense that it will adjust the price up or down, but the difference there is the promotion does show to the customer. So if I went here and did a 10% discount, my price will stay the same, but now it's going to show me that I have a discount of $373, so I end up with the same overall price, but it applies a discount that the customer actually sees. So typically the promotion isn't really used for going up in the price nearly as often. It could be, but the customer would see that it was an increase from the regular price. So it's not really used that way very often. It's more used for discounts. And just like with the pricing level, you can go into the drop down here, add new pricing or add new promotions, and you can also default that promotion to a company record as well, and it will show that you know, it will show to them on their orders that they have a discount of $373. So those are two fairly simple options that you can use to adjust the prices up or down, and that you can set on a per customer basis. Not a lot of extra stuff to them. Those are really the main functions there. Another tool that comes up very often is how you can apply discounts on an overall basis for the different for your different products. So if we go to Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup, and we come over here, there's a section for discount tables. So when you set up a discount table, you can go here and say Add to create a new table and give it a name. And the thing that makes discount tables really interesting is different people base their discounts off of different values. Obviously, the two most common types of discounts is a quantity-based discount, and then there's also an area-based discount. So with the discount table here, you can tell it what value you want to base your discount off of. So I can go here and select a variable here and go and type in the variable quantity and base my discount off of the quantity variable. I could also go and say printed area and select that and say units of square foot, and I can do a discount based off of the area. So you can kind of determine, you know, based off of how this customer, how you want to do your discounts, you can tell it what value to base the discount off of. So we'll go ahead and do, since I've got printed area, let's go ahead and do an area-based discount formula here. So what you can do is essentially now you can insert however many different levels that you want by clicking on Insert here. So I typically start a table off with a 0 value just to set a floor on here. So we'll then say from 0 up to 50 square feet, there's no discount. At 50 square feet, we'll do a 5% discount. At 100, we'll do 10. And essentially, you can just go down and put in your different discount levels in here. And put in what percentages you want to apply to each of those discount levels. Now, one important note to make note of with these discount tables is you do want to make sure that it is numerically accurate. And what I mean by that is basically we start at 0, then 50, 100, 250, 500. You want to make sure that it goes in correct sequential order. So if I had accidentally gone here and put the 500 here, then it's actually going to see the 500 there before it gets down here, and it'll use the value here. So the way that you set up your table is very important. So once you're done with the table, we can go here and save that. So that saves the table, but right now it's not going to do anything. We have the table for reference, but it's not going to be used anywhere. So what I can do now is go to, from the same screen, if I go to the product setup, and we'll go digital prints, and we'll use the wide format print as our test product. Essentially, what you can do with a discount table now is if you go to the product, you can go to the pricing tab here, and kind of similar to how we talked about the promotions and the pricing levels earlier, there's a similar function within here, and that is there's a built-in discount and a default discount field. So the difference there is a built-in discount lets you apply a discount that the customer does not see. It builds it into the price, so your price would go down, but the customer wouldn't actually see that it's going down. Whereas the default discount is the exact opposite, where it shows if I put a discount value in here, it would show to the customer that they're getting a discount. So what we want to do now is, now that we have a discount table, there is a function in the system for discount value, and then so it's discount value and then the name of the table. So I name my table test discount table. So you enter in the name of the table that you created on the step before to reference that discount, and then we can tell it that we want it to be a percentage. So since I entered in 5, 10, 15, 20, I want to make sure that the system recognizes that as a percent. So now I need to tell it what to be a percentage off of. So I do discount value, name of my table, percentage, times pre-discount price. And that is looking at basically the formula up here, pre-discount price, that is saying, give me a discount based off of my calculation on my price from up here. So that will apply a percentage discount to the item based off of the discount price that was set up on that item. So the reason why this is really useful is if you take a look here, I can apply this discount on a per product basis, and I can set different tables. So I can set it up so that way wide format has one table, and then flatbed prints have a different table, and then die-sub prints, they have a third table. So I can set up an individual table for each product, or I can use the same table if I want it to be kind of shared. We can get a little bit fancier with the discounts in terms of formulas. So like we could say, I want to apply this discount if my material is Coro. I want to do, so you can do a lot more with the formulas on that, and that's kind of where the consulting department can come into play. So if you really want to set up a specific table that is used under specific circumstances, you can write a formula to help out with that, and we'd be more than happy to help you out with any of those formulas. But that is how the discounts there are set. Okay, so a couple more topics that we can cover. So we talked about discount tables there. There is a function that we don't use very often. It's used by a couple products in the system, and it's really only used for specific customers. But just how you can kind of set a discount table, you have a way to set up a lookup table. So lookup tables are more just for, like, you have that customer that's always going to get a certain price no matter what, and that's where the lookup tables come into play. This is one I'm going to kind of talk about the basics here, but the discount tables are pretty in-depth, so if it's something that you guys want to go more in, you can join the regular webinar and we can talk about it more. We can do a regular consulting session, but I'll just show you an introduction to the discount tables. So there is a couple of tables that are kind of built into some of these existing products. I believe textiles are pretty heavily used on some of the table options, but we're going to go here and say lookup table and then new lookup table. So you give the table a name, and the very first option that you're going to do is actually set up the table. So what you can do is we're going to tell it how that table is built. Is it a 1, 2, or 3-dimensional table? And what that means is essentially what values do you want to use to be able to determine what my price would be. We'll go ahead and use a 1-dimensional table for now, but you can specify other values as well. So I could do something as simple as just kind of like with the discount table, we can tell it what variable to base it off of, I can tell it, from one quantity to this quantity, do this fixed price. From the next quantity to this quantity, do this fixed price. So there's a couple different ways that you can set up a lookup table as well. You could use printed array. You can use. You could even use individual materials. Those material selections are a little bit iffier because you have to specify them exactly. So we don't really recommend that you do that for individual materials unless you kind of look for some assistance from us to help you set that up, because the individual material tables are a little bit trickier. So we stick this to number-based values. So number of inks, or this is the area, or even image height, image width. So you can fit those particular values. So we're going to go ahead and just base our table off of one number for now, which is image height. And we'll say image height in inches. So we select the dimensions, we select the value to base our table off of, and we click OK, which gives you a table to build off of. So once I specify the definitions of my table, I can go here and say Edit Table, resize it, and a couple things here. On the right side, there's a couple rules here for saying if a row value is not found. So you can make it so that way if there's a value that's selected within your item that doesn't fit the table, you can tell it to return a message, which means in this case here, if I selected anything other than 0 as my image height, this would throw an error. You also have the option here to attempt to return the next value or attempt to return the previous value. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple of rows here. So we got 0 inches, 1 inch, 2 inches, 5 inches, so just have a couple of values on there and just go put some numbers within the table. So what these values do then is attempt to return the next value. So if I had entered an image height of 3 and I had it set to return the next value, it would go up to the next row of 5. If I had it set to return the previous value and I entered 3, it would go down to 2. So you can kind of tell the table which direction to go depending on how you want to set your table up. So now what we can do is based off of this, I can go and say click OK and save that. So that gives us a table that we can use in the formulas. So similar to the discount tables that we set up, if I go to Product Setup, Digital Prints, Wide Format Print, and we go to that Pricing tab again, similar to how we set up a discount here, I can actually go into this section here and do a formula to price out instead of this. And what I typically recommend doing is if you're going to make any formula changes, if you use brackets, so if I go open bracket here and then close bracket here, you can keep any original formulas there, and that way if something happens you can always get back to the original formula. So we highly recommend that you don't delete formulas, but just comment out sections that you don't want to do. So now what I can do is I can say lookup table. I think it's lookup table value. Okay, yep, lookup table value, and then the name of my table. And then now I can tell it to price this however I want. So I can make it be, if I wanted to do a quantity-based price, I can just say times quantity if I wanted to do a flat number. I can say times the printed area in unit area if I wanted to price it off of giving me a square foot price. You can specify this to price however you want, whether it be like number of sheets or quantity or originals. Whatever value you want to base your price off of is what you can tell the lookup table to multiply by. So you have a bit of control whether it's going to give you a area price or if it's going to give you a per quantity price. It's all just determined by how you write your formula there. So lookup tables are, it's like I said, it's mostly used for people that have contract pricing with a particular customer. So it's really not something that we do very often on a general basis, but it is something that you can set up to kind of have a flat price rate if you have a specific customer that kind of says, well, we don't follow your original pricing structure. We have our own special pricing. That's where that really comes into play. So with that, if we go back to our estimate here, that's kind of the main overall tools. There's a couple more things I want to talk about before we really open the floors to just kind of general questions, but that's kind of the main ways to kind of tweak the pricing with some of the existing tools that are in the system. I know one of the things that the notes had mentioned was talking about how to modify what your customer sees on the estimate. I'm going to make a real passing comment because that's not super pricing related, but it is something that is really useful, and that's what we call the product layout. So you have this 124 by 24 inch single-sided print made from banner stock material. So that is what we call the product layout, and that can be changed. It's just that's one of those ones that most customers really prefer our help to assist with that because it does require some formula knowledge. If you are curious about that, it is under Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup, Digital Prints, Wide Format Print, and then there's a tab for Pricing Forms / Product Layouts. If any of the tabs that you're looking for that we mentioned on the call that you don't see, you can always click on the Advanced here and make sure that that tab is showing. So if there's a tab that you don't see that we cover, there's a strong chance it's going to be here on the Advanced tab, and you just need to select the View As tab option. But getting back to here, you have under the Pricing Form Product Layout tab, there is the product layout used for invoices estimates, and the product layout used for work order. We're going to focus on the invoice and estimate one. So if I click on the Edit Product Layout, that gives you the code that it uses to print out on the estimate and the invoice. And like I said, this is something that some customers love getting in here and playing around with, and other people would prefer us to play around with it. But you can control what prints out to your customer by modifying this. So like if I didn't want to print the word stock material after that, I could edit this layout, come up to the top here where it says stock material, and delete that portion of the formula out. So you can control what the customer sees on their estimate invoice through, when you look at this field here where it shows this, that information here can be controlled. So I don't want to get into that too much because that's almost an entire separate topic that we could cover. But it was mentioned on our mission, so I'll go ahead and kind of mention that it is something that we can help you guys out with, or we can even give you the tools. There's a wiki article that we have that discusses some of the basic formula functions if it is something that you are interested in learning yourself as well. This is a really, really basic one. I don't imagine most people know this, but just for the sake of completion, I'll go ahead and mention this. So all the stuff that we mentioned affects the price of the job. But let's say you're doing an item and your price is normal for everyone else, but you have this one specific job for this one specific customer that you don't ever plan on doing again. It's like, just give it to him for 10 bucks. You can always just go into an item and click on the button here. So the price is actually a button. You can always click on that and tell it 10 bucks. So any pricing formulas, you can always go ahead and kind of override any of these calculations, any of these formulas, and just set a flat value on the price and say, for this particular item on this estimate, it's going to be $10 regardless of all these other calculations and modifiers and things that we've set up. So that is always an option as well. So as far as the pricing goes, there is a good chunk more of things that we could really kind of cover. There's pricing plans, things like that. But as for the purposes of this call, those are really the main kind of things that you guys have full control over that you can tweak yourself. All the items that we covered are included in the base OOB version of the program, and they are things that you can create and add to your formulas and make those edits on your own. You don't need any assistance from consulting if you understand the formulas and stuff, but it is something that a lot of people aren't comfortable with formulas and how to write those things, and it's something that personally I enjoy very much so. So we do highly recommend if you have any questions or you want to dive into this stuff some more, you can contact the consulting department. So we do have a couple of questions I think that have come down already. So I believe we are now at a good point to go ahead and open up the floor to some questions. So the first one is for Mariah, asking about setting up a particular margin for a customer rather than a pricing level. That is something that we can do a modifier for, actually. There is a formula that we can set up. a modifier can be created to specify I want to get a specific percentage on this. I don't have the formula off the top of my head. I have to go kind of digging for it, but there is a formula that we can create, that you create a modifier that's a spin edit, that if you put a value in there, it sets the price of your job so that when you get a 38% margin instead of any of the other calculations. So that is something that can be applied to the system through a modifier. So that is a topic that can be done. Looks like there was a follow-up question to that about, you have the modifier already, can you set the default per customer? A modifier default can be set. It can get a little bit tricky because, like we had mentioned, the modifiers are on a per product basis, so you would have to apply it to every product. But if we go to Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup, and we go to the product in question. So if I go to digital prints, wide format print, on the product, there is a modifier link that is kind of the opposite link of what we saw on the modifier setup. So if you have a modifier in there, you can go in there and tell it, in this case here, if I said rush, I can edit this and tell it to set a default value of true to true all the time. Or in your case, Mariah, it could get a little bit fancier. So I can go and say, if transheader dot custom, I'd have to do, this may not be the exact code, I'm just kind of guessing at the moment. I have to go through and do some full testing, really get it working, but a formula can be written that says if the, what is it? Right. Company.company names equal to customer X, then true, else false. So formulas that kind of set different modifier values can be set on a per customer basis, but they have to be, basically it would have to be something like this, where you go and say, if the customer is this, then this, else if the customer is this, then that. So modifiers can be set up as a default, and they can be set per customer, but it does require some formula work to set that up. Okay. So Christina had asked, will the default values from the promotions and the pricing level show on the work order? Those values do not show on the work order. They just kind of affect the price in general. So the prices would be affected on the work order if you show those prices, but those values would not show. Now, if that's something that you need, we can customize those reports to show any of those values that we spoke about. So the pricing level, the promotion, if you want that to show on any of your individual reports, those reports can be customized to show that on, if you do want to show the customer that they have a specific, you could show it on the invoice. We could modify the work order and show those values on the work order. Any number of reports that you want to show those fields can be modified to show those fields.
Kyle?
Yes.
Clarify, I just meant on, if you're looking at the work order in width, it'll show up in like the top right hand corner, correct? Like where it says, right now it says standard. If you have default values chosen for a company, you connect the company to the work order.
You mean right here if it will show, is what you're saying? Okay, then yeah, if you have a default value set on a company record, so in fact I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. So let's pull up test company. Okay, so they already have a pricing level, so that's a good example. So if I go ahead and say test company here, you'll see the pricing level will go ahead and change up there, and it doesn't have like the button that it did beforehand where I click the button and it set back to standard, because my default is 115. So I can set standard, in which case then it will actually turn the standard red to let me know I overrid it. But it will change up there if the company has a value set. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, I got a question from Jasmine. I can answer that for sure. I just want to make sure that we go through all the any other pricing related questions first, but I will double back to that if there's no other pricing questions that anyone has. So does anyone have any other questions about the topics that we covered today in terms of the pricing adjustments? If you do have any questions, please type them in the box and I'll get to them as I can. No questions today? I do that good of a job, right? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and give you guys some more time to type in the questions, but I can go ahead and double back to Jasmine's question. So without actually being able to see your system, I can tell you an idea of what's going on, because basically what's happening in those cases, like if you go in here and you go to this resolution and you added a new resolution list or type something in that isn't part of the list, it's going to try to do an evaluation that doesn't exist, in which case then it's going to say, you know, evaluation error, only similar data can be added, or something like that. Basically what that's trying to do is it's trying to evaluate something on that resolution list that doesn't work. So if you just type something in or you don't have it linked to something correctly, it's more than likely something like this. Now, one comment to make is more than often this error is just a display error. It would not affect your price in most cases because it's just saying it can't generate the product layout because there's some error there. So it's just saying it can't generate what would print out on the estimate and the invoice. Now, however, when you mentioned something about going through and saved a new resolution, like how did you just go in kind of do what I did where you just typed it in there rather than having it be one of the initial selections, or did you go and modify? Okay, yeah, if you just typed it in there, it's not going to save it to the list. And the reason we really recommend you don't.
Yeah. Sorry, it's Jasmine. I'm sorry for interrupting. I did actually go in and add new to it, and then I went to save it, and it was fine. But then I broke it. I broke Sirius. And now nothing's printing on my work orders. They're completely blank.
Right, and that's just because of what we just mentioned, where if it gives you that error-generating product layout, essentially kind of crashes the entire layout. Yeah. That might have to be saved for a regular webinar call. I can't really take a look at your screen right now. So it's something related to that list and the fact that something on that list isn't right formula-wise. It's going to be, let's see, setup, pricing setup, all pricing setup, selection lists, and then back here in selection list there's a large formats resolution somewhere around here. Or I can't remember, flat stock resolution
I have it
list.
under vehicle wraps right now. That's where I had tried to put it in, but it's not working. When is when is the regular webinar? I didn't realize this is a pricing one.
Basically, for the most part, our webinars are Tuesday through Friday at the same time at 1 o'clock Central. It's like once a month we do a dedicated topic webinar. So.
Of course, I called today. Well, I broke it so no one can use Sirius now, so now I'm in trouble. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. If I have, I'll see what I can do. But we do have some more pricing questions. Can you give a customer a flat dollar discount? And the answer there is yes. So back in the promotion, you saw that there's a percentage discount, and then there's just a flat $10 coupon. So I can select, $10 coupon, and what it does is there's actually, okay, because I left my error here. Let me fix that. It actually adds an item that will give you a negative price on there, and you can create additional ones on there by going and saying new and saying 1,000%. And then just go and say, instead of a percentage off, do a fixed discount. That's one way to do it. Now, this way is kind of good if you don't really want to do a flat discount on an individual item. Otherwise, if you're just trying to do a flat discount on a single item, how we went in and override the price earlier, you can kind of do the same thing. You go and override the discount and say there's a flat $10 discount on there. So it kind of depends. You can give a flat discount to an individual item if you know what that discount is going to be, or if you don't really want to apply a discount to a particular item at all, that's where you can go and do the promotion and create a $1,000 coupon and kind of give them, or a $100 coupon and just kind of give them $100 off, not off of a particular item, but just $100 off in general. So in addition to percentages off, you can do just flat discounts as well. Any other pricing questions? I got one question from Christina that I'm going to be able to only halfway answer because I'm still playing around with it myself. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start answering that question, though if I see any other pricing questions crop up, I will dive to them first. So basically, I can only give you a little bit of an explanation of this because it's something I haven't yet really dived into yet much myself. But basically in 5.7 they have added a couple of new features. Basically derived products and smart parts. Derived products is basically where you select a product and you go here and say add and say new derived product, and what that does is you're basically saying here's a product that is the same as my wide format, but I'm going to override specific values. And this is something that we've been waiting for a long time. And the reason for that is I can create a derived product and tell it to, I'm going to default my image height to be 48 inches, and I'm going to add image width and default that to be 96 inches. So with that, I can basically create a product that I don't have to go through and specify all the variables. I don't have to kind of recreate it from scratch. I'm basically creating a product that uses the wide format as a template with specific overrides. So I can create different product templates that are still part of my wide format print. So if I make any changes to my wide format print, anything that I didn't override would affect all my derived products. So if I needed to go and set any formula corrections, kind of like we've been talking about against cloning products for now because of this very reason, if I need to make any formula changes, I make it on my wide format, and all of my derived products that are templates of that wide format would pick up all the changes except for those overridden variables. So it is a function that we've been waiting for a long time that has a lot of ability to kind of say, hey, I sell yard signs, and I sell these, and I sell all these things that we default these values to. You can now do that without having the same restrictions that we used to kind of say about not doing it often because there's lots of formula work. So that's what derived products is. Smart parts, I don't really think I'm set to talk to you on that one much right now. Essentially, it's kind of a new way to be able to add a part search and add parts on the fly. I've not really been able to test that out too much myself. It's going to be really useful for something like textiles, where you can kind of search on and add individual textiles from a search list, but I don't really have much interaction with it right now to really give you a good overview of what it can do. All right, do we have any other questions? Preferably pricing related, but other questions are welcome if we're not getting other questions. Yeah, basically then, the issue that you just mentioned isn't really an issue. They did change up. If I go to wide format print, variables, and dimensions, in this case here, image height, they did change up the way that this screen looks a lot, but the functionality is still 100% the same. So the variable type is still a number. My unit length is still length in inches. My default here is still 0. My valid, they just kind of arrange things where they put the save options here at the bottom. So the options that used to be at the top are now at the bottom, and the options at the bottom are now at the top, is really the biggest change. But functionality-wise, this works no different at all from the way that it used to work. So it is something that even I'm still getting used to myself in terms of the different layout look, but the functionality here on the screen is no different at all. It just looks different. So yeah, there is nothing that you need to worry about your sales guide, because this is only on the back end of where people are even going to see this. So your sales team shouldn't ever notice this stuff unless they're going in and modifying variables. Okay, any last questions? Probably have time for one or two more before we are out of time for today. Okay, well, so I know there was a lot of open-ended stuff, but in terms of like the pricing formulas, I could spend all day talking about formulas, so that would really fall into its own call almost. But there are lots of tools that you can use to adjust your prices in terms of giving discounts, setting individual prices for customers, adding in additional fields to let you adjust prices based off of, fields that you guys need to set. There's lots of little tricks and tips that you can use to affect your current pricing. We didn't touch too much on the base pricing. There's already plenty of videos and other things for going in and adjusting things like, adjusting your multipliers and things like that. So this is more focused on your additional tools on top of just your regular part adjustment pricing. So, Kristen, anything else? Or I think it sounds like we are about set for today, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Kyle. I just have 2 items to touch on. This session was recorded, and the recording will be available and posted next week. You can find them, and you can find this one and last month's when we covered macros on the training section of the website. Once you log in, go to training and then other resources, and there's a section there that talks about the consulting webinar, and there's a link to these specific topic recordings. It's also available in the basic training section as well under in-depth training. So 2 locations where you can find these recordings. And then also, as a heads up, our topic next month will be dashboards. So we'll cover kind of how to set them up, how you can put advanced queries on the dashboards, and that will be Wednesday, December 16th. So kind of the pattern we're getting into here is the 3rd Wednesday of every month. We'll take the regularly scheduled consulting webinar session and make it topic focused. So just kind of keep an eye out for announcements for those, and we look forward to seeing you next month.